Okay, we are going through 5 articles, so to speak. So let's just get started. So this is from PubMed, ketogenic diet and cardiovascular diseases. Essentially, the carnivore diet is the most extreme type of ketogenic diet as far as having the lowest amount of carbohydrates. A lot of people essentially on a carnivore diet like me essentially eat zero carbohydrates. So talks about cardiovascular disease, which we know um, is one of the most common cause of death worldwide. So the ketogenic diet. So anytime you see ketogenic diet, you can substitute carnivore diet in general, unless they're specifying specific types of ketogenic diets which might deviate from the carnivore diet to a significant degree. Ketogenic diet has been shown to have a multifaceted effect on the prevention treatment of CVD, beneficial effect on blood lipid profile. That you'll see is kind of a recurring theme by specifically decreasing triglycerides and increasing HDL. Um, there's a mix where some will show maybe some changes to LDL or total cholesterol, but they're kind of on both sides, so it's kind of a wash. There is this distinction between so-called atherogenic LDL and possibly not so atherogenic large particle LDL and so forth. We'll see that later on. It shows strong anti-inflammatory and cardioprotective potential, which is due, among other factors, to the anti-inflammatory properties of the state of ketosis, the elimination of simple sugars, the restriction of total carbohydrates, and the supply of omega-3 fatty acids as opposed to omega-6. Ketone bodies provide rescue fuel for the diseased heart by affecting its metabolism. They also have a beneficial effect on the function of the vascular endothelium, including improving its function, inhibiting premature aging. I mean, okay, well, wouldn't really put too much into that. Ketogenic diet has beneficial effect on blood pressure and other CVD risk factors. Blood pressure, especially if you subscribe to the theory that insulin resistance tends to be the origin of hypertension or elevated blood pressure in many cases. Weight loss, we know about visceral fat, correlation between visceral fat and metabolic disease, inflammation, etc. Evidence cited is often superior to that for standard diets, making it likely that the ketogenic diet shows advantages over other dietary models in the prevention treatment of CVD. So, I mean, you can studies on, say, for example, low-fat diets, high carbohydrate, low-fat diet, moderate carbohydrate, low-fat diet. You don't really see great results from those, though those are widely prescribed, at least in the Western world, by the medical community and so forth. Um, if we can get the full text open access, won't need this so much anymore. The other one. Um, Effects of the ketogenic diet, lipid profile, heart metabolism, beneficial effect, improvement in blood pressure, reduction of excessive body weight, beneficial effect on the vascular endothelium, anti-inflammatory and cardioprotective effect. Another thing is it is associated with decreased meal frequency. We'll see on this last study that people on the carnivore diet generally eat 1 to 2 meals a day. One of those people, and eating generally basically produces an inflammatory response. So decreasing the frequency of meals, one benefit of that is you're decreasing those frequency of those inflammatory responses in response to consumption of food. So CVD, we just talked about that. You know the statistics. I mean, you know the severity of the problem. Um, Everybody knows. Um, WHO lists high total cholesterol as one of the risk factors for these diseases. Well, we'll see about that. Um, and then a relationship between higher TC levels and increased cardiovascular mortality. 10-year cohort study showed highest risk of ischemic heart disease at total cholesterol is lower than 155 and greater than 185. So low is bad? Well, low cholesterol is associated with things like you'll see that in someone who's sick because cholesterol is an antioxidant. You might see that in someone with cancer. Um, and that can actually just basically make worsen their chances because cholesterol again is an antioxidant. Um, there are large discrepancies, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not putting too much stock in this whole correlation between total cholesterol and cardiovascular mortality. Cholesterol is something you make, your body makes, and to think that your body would make overproduce, it's kind of hard to believe considering I mean, unless you have some kind of genetic abnormality or something like that, it's kind of hard to believe that that's going to actually happen frequently in nature that an animal is going to overproduce something. There's a lot of feedback mechanisms in physiology, especially animal physiology. Well, all physiology. LDL is considered so-called bad cholesterol, and even more significant factor than TC. Again, kind of I doubt that because there's one thing is a U shape. Oh, what does that mean? Highest risk occurred at the lowest and highest LDL concentrations. So if your LDL goes super low, um, bad news, likely. And why might that be? LDL, again, is something your body makes. It is worth noting very low LDL concentrations are additionally strongly associated with the risk of death from any cause. So, like, for example, a study that is stopped that has the intention originally of aggressively reducing LDL and has a higher mortality among the patients with the lowest LDL achieved the therapeutic means, and so the study is halted. That would be suggestive that LDL is maybe not not what we should be targeting, trying to bring it down. Also, you know about people who have low LDL and have heart attacks. It's pretty much I think 50% roughly, let's say. I think I heard something along those lines. 50% of people who have heart attack actually have let's in quotes normal or low LDL, something like that. So and given different, and plus we were going to get into the difference between LDL, can it differentiate between so-called good LDL and so-called bad LDL, or those small, dense and the large buoyant LDL. And then, given the different methodological approaches, yeah, there's an incentive to demonize LDL because there's drugs that lower LDL, that is statins. For example, given the different methodological approaches and suggestions of the authors of another publication, there is no strong evidence for the causality of LDL in the development of CVD. Yeah, what would be the mechanism? It is therefore worth noting that a correlation does not imply causality. HDL is considered so-called good cholesterol, and increased its concentration is considered a beneficial effect. So this is something we can be pretty clear, certain about. There's a positive relationship between a high LDL and protection. High triglyceride levels. This one also, we have a pretty clear understanding that it's an inverse relationship. So high triglycerides, increased risk. Low triglycerides, decreased risk. Again, this is just more background. Impact on the blood lipid profile is undoubtedly controversial, right? Because it's not going, they'll show, for example, let's look at the randomized control trial, ketogenic diet versus the standard diabetes diet, which is going to have much more carbohydrates. And there's no discussion of seed oils in any of these, at least not specifically, but we know that's kind of a different topic for another day. But basically, seed oils are bad for you. So that's basically the bottom line on that. So ketogenic diet versus standard diabetes diet. So maybe like what you see American Diabetes Association, ADA, what they're recommending, um, approximately. In overweight or obese patients with type 2 diabetes, ketogenic diet showed greater benefit, greater reduction in total cholesterol. Okay. Um, Triglycerides and LDL. In addition, HDL fraction changed more favorably. So there's the HDL to triglyceride ratio also we can look at, which the higher the better. That's pretty much undisputed. I mean, those basically that kind of um, is flows from the idea of HDL good, triglycerides bad. So HDL to triglyceride ratio good, high. That's going to be a good thing. Just logically, it is important that despite the assumption of same calorie consumption, 1500 plus or minus 50 calories. So that's the narrow range there. The body weights of participants using ketogenic diets decreased on average from 78.32 plus minus 15.27 to 70.26 plus minus 14.79. Comparison body weights of participants using standard diabetes diet did not change for an average of 77.95 plus minus 14.76 to 77.34. So these confidence intervals are not going to quite overlap to some degree, I guess. Like the tails are not going to overlap. But I mean, it's not like, yeah, it's not like this is going from 78 to and then the other one has an upper range below 63 or anything like that. On the one hand, there's an argument in favor of the ketogenic diet. On the other hand, should be no greater benefits in the form changes in lipid profile may result directly from weight loss. Yeah, but weight loss, you could say, if that pretty consistently occurs with this treatment arm in ketogenic diet, well then um, that kind of it just makes it just kind of a benefit, I guess. Um, I mean, it's not a that's kind of the counter argument to that. Also could be influenced by the composition of the diet itself. This is some speculation here, in which there was a significant share of unsaturated fatty acids from olive oil, avocado, and fish in the ketogenic diet. Yeah, but that's just kind of saying that there's other factors that could be involved, but they might not be the explanatory. They might not be the explanation. Fish, I'm fine with that. Olive oil, avocado, you don't need that. Another RCT compared the well-formulated ketogenic diet with the Mediterranean Plus diet among patients with diabetes and pre-diabetes. Advantage of ketogenic diet was evidenced by greater reduction in triglycerides, greater increase in HDL, showed an increase in LDL, while there was a reduction among the while there was a reduction in the people who were taking in the Med Plus. The Med Plus people could have been taking seed oils. Seed oils are going to reduce your total cholesterol, because your body will start making less of its own cholesterol in response. But if your body starts incorporating a lot of plant cholesterol, so that's a problem. They're not the same thing, but if they end up in your cell membranes and so forth, then just problem. You can't really use them to make testosterone and estrogen and so forth. So you might have deficiencies, low levels of those things. And there's a bunch of other problems with seed oils. Another RCT was conducted in 2022. The effect of the ketogenic diet on lipid profile with people with severe obstructive sleep apnea. Diet had a beneficial effect, reduction in total cholesterol, LDL, and triglycerides. It is worth mentioning that the results were due to the simultaneous use of the low-calorie ketogenic diet with continuous positive airway pressure. They were superior to those in intervention limited to CPAP alone. HDL was not significantly altered in either group. However, it may be just a short term. I don't know the duration. He observed greater benefits of the CPAP plus low-calorie ketogenic diet group may have resulted from a much greater weight loss. There are people who stop snoring, going to carnivore. If those inflammation might be involved in the upper airway. Um, then that might decrease with a carnivore diet because something that might be in kind of prolonging that inflammation might be something in the diet, like some kind of plant uh, derived food. Another randomized controlled trial showed no significant differences in lipid profiles. Showed that, yikes, ketogenic diet increased LDL in every healthy young woman, also increased the concentration of small dense LDL and large floating LDL. In addition, an increase in ApoB was observed. Concluded the ketogenic diet in this case contributed to the worsening of the blood lipid profile in the women's study. It's worth noting in which there was no weight loss. So you might look at exactly why this is an outlier from that standpoint. If you look at people on a carnivore diet, they generally, or a ketogenic diet, they generally lose weight. So maybe kind of like the did it wrong kind of possibility arises here. The people on ketogenic diet, maybe they were doing something wrong, maybe a bunch of seed oils. On the other hand, other publications suggest it's not cause for concern. Yeah, putting further doubt about on this one here. Association between LDL. Author concludes that although many studies show an association between LDL and cardiovascular diseases, this is not conclusive of a causal relationship. Yeah, there's people talking about how you can have high LDL for two reasons. One is somebody who's metabolically unhealthy, which again that's the main problem, not the high LDL, but it's metabolically unhealthy. It's the diabetes or the insulin pre-diabetes, insulin resistance. Or you could have high LDL in what they call lean mass hyperresponders, in which case the LDL is transporting fat, which is being used as a primary energy source throughout the body. Another trial reported a beneficial effect of the ketogenic diet on lipid profile, including reducing LDL. Importantly, benefits were observed regardless of the type of protein consumed. Well, I don't really care about that. I mean, just vegetable protein has problems, and whey protein, there's just no need for that. Animal protein is all you would need. So this is kind of confusing. I mean, overcomplicating things. I mean, I wouldn't dwell on that stuff. That's what I'm getting at. In addition, a significant reduction in LDL, significant reduction in total cholesterol, triglycerides, HDL fraction did not change much. Again, maybe that takes some time. Another RCT conducted among women with hyperinsulinemia, excessive body weight, on the other hand, showed that HDL increased significantly in women following a low-calorie ketogenic diet, from 37 to 53, significantly better than the control group, went from 44 to 43. Triglycerides decreased in LCKD, may have been mainly due to weight loss and reduction in waist circumference. Both are good things in general for most people, unless somebody is, because this isn't, you're not getting into a starvation situation here. So somebody who's already starts out skinny, I mean, they're just not going to see a big change. That's all. Given the inconclusive results, worth studying a longer study. Effective ketogenic diet on the blood lipid profile. So I believe this is summation. So yeah, we talked about these: the KD, STD, Med Plus, etc., the CPAP. So let's go back. Yikes. All right. Taking into account proven anti-inflammatory effects of the ketogenic diet, its beneficial effects in the prevention and treatment of CVD seems reasonable. Especially if you subscribe to the theory that cardiovascular disease, essentially, there has to be endothelial damage, which is often associated with inflammation and or oxidative stress. If you've decreased the inflammation in your system, for example, through dietary changes, which can be kind of measured by, say, a decreased CO-reactive protein level in your blood, that might be cardioprotective or reduce your chances of having cardiovascular disease. Mechanisms, this is what I think is more relevant than what some study might show some 20% difference or something, especially those epidemiological studies where they're asking people, like food questionnaire type studies, which many people have talked about why those are something not to put much stock in. So there are many potential mechanisms through which the ketogenic diet demonstrates its anti-inflammatory potential. However, four main factors can be identified. Place the body into a state of nutritional ketosis, associated in turn with a number of different biochemical and physiological mechanisms. The process is occurring, exert a systemic anti-inflammatory effect, which in turn has a direct bearing on cardiovascular diseases. And also, that's why a lot of people go on the carnivore diet, is because they have some kind of autoimmune condition. They might have inflammatory bowel disease, skin issues, etc., and arthritis. Um, and oftentimes they see improvements in those conditions because they're reducing the inflammation throughout the whole body. The second most important factor is elimination of pro-inflammatory simple sugars from the diet. This is reflected within CVD. In fact, restriction of total amount of carbohydrates in diet can show specific anti-inflammatory benefits in the context of cardiometabolic health. High-fat, well-composed ketogenic diet. I mean, this is, again, really complicating things. What does well-composed mean? It's also rich in omega-3 fatty acids, and their anti-inflammatory and cardioprotective effects are well known. So anti-inflammatory, cardioprotective potential of ketone bodies. I think this one mentions beta-hydroxybutyrate specifically, or it might be another one of these. Anti-inflammatory, cardioprotective potential of carbohydrate restriction. Also, you don't, when you look at breads and grains, you think about leaky gut. Think about the effects of gluten, gliadin, and zonulins as well. Anti-inflammatory cardioprotective potential of eliminating sugars, and anti-inflammatory cardioprotective potential of omega-3 fatty acids. You could also think of this as the absence of omega-6, or the reduction of omega-6 in proportion to omega-3, and you could think of it as the absence of vegetable seed oils in general. If people are eating a lot of animal fat, they're going to tend to be eating less. There's a lower chance of them eating vegetable sources of fat. Again, beta-hydroxybutyrate is the main ketone. Okay, so this one specifically mentions it, anti-inflammatory properties, including mimicking the fasting state. And that's outside the scope of this video. Fasting is, as far as talking about benefits of prolonged fasting, not starvation, but fasting. So you're not losing muscle mass until if you're fasting. If you're losing muscle mass, then you're starving. And then anti-inflammatory cardioprotective effects of elimination of simple sugars. Yeah, that is a difference these days, where there's a lot of simple sugars in the modern Western diets. And hemoglobin A1C, another thing about hemoglobin A1C, just wanted to mention that I've heard, is that hemoglobin A1C measures glycation of proteins in your body due to glucose, but apparently does not measure the glycation that might be caused by fructose. And fructose is much more potent at glycating proteins. So somebody might have a normal, quote, hemoglobin A1C, but that might not be measuring they might be eating a lot of fruit, which might be causing a lot of glycation that's just being missed. Also, hemoglobin A1C can be lower in people who are consuming a lot of seed oils because the red blood cells are not living as long. So that's kind of does affect the number that's produced. Just trying to move along through here because could be doing this for hours, and we're still on the first one. And the links are going to be in the video. The influence on cardiac energy metabolism is increasingly being studied and described in scientific publications due to the specific state of ketosis in which there is increased induction of ketone body production. So, just to clarify for anybody who's wondering about don't some tissues in the body require glucose? Aren't there some tissues in the body that can't use ketone bodies for energy? And that's true. Some places in the brain and so forth, but the body makes the glucose that's needed to feed those tissues. So that's gluconeogenesis, which your body regulates and monitor and performs when it needs to. Because your body monitors your blood glucose levels and controls them, keeps them within a narrow range, assuming that the person doesn't make it harder on the system and overwhelm the system by, for example, eating a ton of glucose or taking a lot of insulin or something like that. An overdose of insulin or an excessive dose. Endothelial cells, it can get into figures that are easier to look at. Higher ketone bodies plus elimination of sugars. So increase in ketone bodies, energy for endothelial cells, improvement of endothelial cell function. Endothelial cells, basically the cells lining the blood vessels. For example, like the arteries to the heart, the coronary arteries. Modulation of vascular endothelium, anti-inflammatory effect, increased activity of nitric oxide synthase, and inhibition of premature aging of vascular cells. Again, I don't want to get too much into the aging effects because don't want to get people to think that they can live to 200 or something. Inhibition of the activation of pro-inflammatory and pro-atherosclerotic genes, a decrease in blood glucose, decrease in glycated hemoglobin in the blood. You're going to have decrease in glycated hemoglobin, but really it's not like glycated hemoglobin is the main problem. It's just that that's the marker of glycation throughout the body. For example, it might be affecting the kidney. It could be affecting other blood vessels, for example, in the feet. Ketogenic diet and weight loss is a factor. Again, your metabolic syndrome classically is going to have a large waist circumference, overweight, and that's going to be associated with high visceral fat. So for the sake of just trying to keep this thing moving, let's go on to this one. So BMC medicine effects of ketogenic diet on health outcomes, an umbrella review of meta-analyses of randomized clinical trials. Or they're just going to call them ketogenic diets. Patients with epilepsy and adults with overweight or obesity. So they're basically aggregating multiple studies to look at them. So there's kind of a more power, so to speak, in aggregating multiple studies together. Then you have more data points. So ketogenic, low carbohydrate, high fat diet, such as a carnivore diet, versus the very low calorie ketogenic diet. This and because they're both keto, so you can look at both of them. If you're just saying keto in general and you're not narrowing it being more specific than that. So the study includes studies of this study looks at um, low carb and low calorie keto. So 17 studies um, look through all these things through from February 23, and then more methods here. Um, Here's what they used, and all right, summaries of associations. Okay, yeah, okay. Associations involved anthropometric measures such as body weight, BMI, waist circumference, HDL, LDL, hemoglobin A1C, fasting plasma glucose, respiratory exchange ratio, blood pressure, etc. Okay. Significant associations. All right. Random effect size. I think this is exactly what we want to look at. Okay. Ketogenic diet, body weight, visceral fat. That's the inflammatory fat, uh, the highly inflammatory fat. So when these large blood fat cells, the blood supply to the center of those cells is impaired due to the size of the cells because the blood um, and that can cause inflammation. Basically, that kind of having low amount of blood supply to the center of that cell can be pro-inflammatory. Ketogenic, low carb, and very low calorie ketogenic. So you can have um, adults with overweight. This is more important than the healthy people, so to speak. For now, let's just focus on this. BMI, maybe kind of here's going down. This is waist circumference. This is what kind of we see from anecdotally, um, and um, triglycerides going down. That's pretty much consistent. A1C coming down. This is again one we're seeing. LDL up, maybe LDL plus minus, maybe about the same. Total cholesterol maybe goes up, maybe goes down. Decreased seizure frequency. We've known about ketogenic diets for epilepsy for a while. And then athletes, again, maybe they're not as important to worry about, you would think. Um, Body weight might not really change. Maybe they're already at their optimal weight. So it's said that a carnivore diet, for example, will kind of get somebody back to where they should be. So if they're overweight, they might come down. If they're underweight, they may come up. Respiratory exchange ratio, heart rate. All right. So it's somewhat of a mixed bag to just kind of be upfront, I guess. So you can look at federal seizure control. Anti-epileptic mechanisms remain unknown, but are likely multifactorial. All right. Not going to delve into that so much. Though our aggregate results confirm an increase in LDL and total cholesterol, it is important to note that an increase in either of these levels does not necessarily signify a potentially deleterious cardiovascular endpoint. Qualification derives from the fact that LDL particles are widely heterogeneous in composition and size, with small, dense LDL particles being significantly more atherogenic than larger LDL particles. Our observed aggregate effect of KD on cholesterol levels does not account for the difference in LDL particle size, nor does it distinguish the sources of dietary fat, which can also be a significant effector of LDL particle size distribution metabolism. So there we're talking about the distinction between good and bad, so to speak, LDL, which are both which are not disaggregated in like the LDL number that we normally see in blood tests. Most RCTs of KD were conducted with people who are have these kinds of medical issues. Um, we demonstrated the benefits of keto and various outcomes in the short term may prove difficult to sustain in the long term because of challenges in adherence or compliance. So, you hear about people who were on a carnivore or keto diet and they say they couldn't stick to it. Which is unfortunate. As for any diet interventions to achieve sustainable weight loss, factors of success include adherence, negative energy balance, and high quality foods, communication, blah, 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 blah. So this energy, what is that called? What's the term they use here? Um, Switching to other dietary interventions to maintain negative energy balance. So I know that like in the first couple weeks of carnivore, because I used to do a lot of cardio, and then when I started carnivore, I kept doing cardio quite a bit, and then in the beginning I was like there were some times when I was struggling like in the first few weeks, but that went away, and then I actually don't do cardio anymore because I realized there was no need to do that. I just lift weights. High quality foods. So this is getting at the standpoint of, some people might not be able to afford ground beef and things like that. There are kind of outside the scope of this video to get into that. But those cheap meats, so to speak, that are still better, like your bolognas and Vienna sausages and spam and stuff like that. Okay, Annals of Internal Medicine. Low carb ketogenic diet versus a low fat diet to treat obesity and hyperlipidemia randomized controlled trial. This is from 2004. I didn't give the dates of the other ones, but I'm not going to go back. So, less than 20 grams of carbohydrates daily initially, plus nutritional supplementation, or a low fat diet, less than 30% fat, less than 300 milligrams of cholesterol, a deficit of 500 to 1,000 kilocalories per day, plus exercise recommendation and group meetings. So the low carb also got nutritional supplementation, which does this do they actually need it? Maybe not. Otherwise, this is the same. It doesn't mention the calories of the low carb group. I guess we can figure that out later. Weight loss was greater in the low carb diet group than in the low fat diet group. There's a lot of we can get into that. Why that is. Weight loss, a lot of times, basically, insulin is your main concern. So, insulin is a hindrance to weight loss. Insulin causes your body to store rather than use the stored energy. So, if you have a lower insulin levels, which is something seen, which is kind of a goal of keto or a carnivore diet, um, then you are going to generally lose weight. Fat-free weight loss is greater in the low carb. Both groups lost substantially more fat mass than fat-free mass. Well, that's good. So not losing more muscle than fat or anything like that, or bone. Compared to the recipients of low-fat diet, recipients of low carb had greater decreases in triglyceride levels. So that's important. And greater increases in HDL. And so also your HDL to triglyceride ratio is also improved. Changes in LDL did not differ statistically, so that makes it even tougher for opponents of keto because this isn't even in their favor in this case. Um, Minor adverse effects are more frequent in the low carb diet group. That's a pretty vague sentence just to drop there. Maybe you have diarrhea or something in the beginning. Diarrhea can especially happen on carnivores. Someone starts out eating way too much meat and they might also be eating butter with that too. So we could not definitively distinguish effects of low carb And those are the nutritional supplements provided only to that group. Provided participants were healthy and were followed for only 24 weeks. So yeah, they were basically just kind of sabotage themselves to a slight degree. The low carb also had these supplements, so somebody could make the counter argument, oh, the supplements, that's what made the difference. Or it was a large contributing factor. So maybe next time take those supplements out. And it was only 24 weeks and they were healthy people. Um, so yeah. And low carb popular despite a dearth of data. Well, who would be funding the studies for low carb? There's not that many keto products out there. And then also for if you're just going to skip keto and can try carnivore, there's not a lot of carnivore products out there yet. Besides just, what you find in your regular beef and pork and bacon and eggs that you find that might be made from might come from your local farmer. Community dwelling hypolipidemic persons were, okay. So community dwelling as opposed to institutionalized. As the prevalence of obesity has increased over the past 20 years, difficulties faced by, so past 20 years, what has largely been the recommendation to people about health? Stay away from meat, stay away from fat, stay away from cholesterol, um, eat more plants, eat your vegetables, eat fruits, and eat your fiber, eat your grains, whole grains, and all that. And also, there has been more emphasis on cardiovascular and aerobic activity over the last 20 years, but that doesn't seem to have made that much of a positive difference. Difficulties faced by overweight patients have become apparent. Fewer than 25% of Americans who attempt to lose weight actually reduce caloric intake. Yeah, but you're assuming that that's what that would be what they have to do. But you're not talking about how many actually reduce carbohydrates and go keto. Increase exercise as currently recommended. There can be problems with increasing exercise. There's people who exercise more and more than they ever have, and their weight is going up. Persons who successfully lose weight have difficulty maintaining their weight loss. Okay, people know this. This is all known stuff. Low carb diet. So what did it mean? Meat, fowl, fish, and shellfish, unlimited eggs, 4 ounces of hard cheese, 2 cups of salad, vegetables. See, I mean, the more they complicate it, the more confounding factors you've got here. Well, maybe it was the lettuce that made the difference, or maybe it's the broccoli. I mean, see how this is just kind of not ideal. But if you're maybe trying to get people to actually go on the study, to actually kind of sign up, maybe they would have to say, I got to have maybe this is what you need to sell it to them, that they can still have this stuff. But, not ideal. Simulate the practice of a study sponsor. A low-carb group also receive daily nutritional supplements, multivitamin, essential oil, chromium. Yeah, okay, whatever. Low-fat diet. Again, we talked about the calories and so forth. This is like your um, Biggest Loser diet, the TV show, Biggest Loser, where people just eat like low fat, super low calorie, and do a lot of exercise, and then they don't have long term results, or they rebound after, which is what the classic yo-yo diet composition. I mean, I guess they're probably logging the food. We're just gonna assume that that's what that's talking about. And they did their questionnaires and whatnot. And so you can see that basically these numbers look pretty similar as far as your population's baseline and, starting point. Low fat and low carb is losing weight more. You can see that. Low fat and low carb. This is weight again. We know that the weight is lower Um, there's more weight loss in the low carb and low carb, low fat. Unsatisfied with weight loss. Unsatisfied with weight loss. There's a square, and that's lower. Um, yeah, you just see. I mean, these are lower weights than the low fat. I mean, low carb. Diet comp. Yeah, okay. 30 grams of carbs on low carb. 98 grams of protein. Nice. And 110 grams of fat. Good. Um, so that's like a pound and a quarter of ground beef. If like a pound of ground beef is like 76 grams of protein is ish. Steak is like about 10, a ribeye, maybe 10 ounces, like 60 something, 64 grams of protein, say. That's like 15 pounds of ribeye. I'm sure that's not what they're doing. I mean, they're probably mixing it. They're probably getting, and this egg is 6 grams. So you have to like, that would be like 17 eggs, 16 eggs. So no one's eating 16, 17 eggs. But ketonuria, I mean, like I care. I don't care about that. Um, and percentage of total weight loss was similar. Blah, 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 blah. The expected mean change in fat mass was minus 9.4 kg in the low carb and minus 4.8 kg in the low fat. Mean difference is negative 4.6 kilograms. Mean change in fat, blah, 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 blah. I know a lot of people, this is what they care about is the weight loss, which is fine. But trying to move through this. Severe symptomatic adverse effects occurred more frequently in low carbohydrate diet group, including constipation. There is a transition, especially changing. There's all kinds of problems of transitional issues that people can experience when they start a keto or carnivore, which is even further to the extreme, coming from a standard American diet or something like that. There's carbohydrate withdrawal. There is oxalate dumping is frequently seen. So those are things that we can that are there's a lot of information out there, and the keto flu, so to speak, and things like that. Muscle cramps, that is something that can be alleviated by drinking more water before going to sleep. Um, Diarrhea, that can be improved by um, decreasing the meal frequency to 1 or 2 per day. Um, and also by just kind of staying away from going crazy with the butter and cheese and things like that. Try not to have like 3 or 4 pounds of meat in a day unless you're lifting like crazy. Um, Low carb led to greater weight loss, reduction in serum triglycerides, increase in HDL compared with low fat. Um, Etc. I mean, these are pretty much recurring themes. Confirmed decrease in triglycerides. Low carbohydrate experienced an increase in HDL, which occurred concurrently with weight loss. Although the effect is uncommon in setting weight loss, HDL is known to increase when dietary carbohydrate is replaced by saturated, monounsaturated, or polyunsaturated fat. Now, that's a fair statement. They don't want to say that it's necessarily which one or maybe a combo or any of these. With traditional low-fat diets, HDL generally decreases from baseline during active weight loss and then increases during weight stabilization when the diet is maintained. So HDL going down, that's not a good thing though. So why would a low-fat diet be better than the low-carb diet? The burden of proof is on the low fat diet to actually show why they would be better, what the advantage is. Way to drop out differed. Yeah, we can say that the low carb is probably going to struggle more, especially in our society, where people eat a lot of carbohydrates. It's just socially, it's just culturally, it's what people do. So going low carb is really difficult for a lot of people for social reasons and things like that. All right. National Library of Medicine, ketogenic diet, its potential role in preventing type 2 diabetes and its complications, a narrative review of randomized controlled trials, diabetes, global health crisis, obviously. Ketogenic diet characterized by low carb intake has shown promise in weight management, blood sugar control. However, its potential for preventing type 2 DM remains largely unexplored. Studies from 2013 through 2023 findings suggest the diet can effectively aid weight loss and improve blood glucose levels. Some evidence indicate reduced reliance on diabetes medications, or effects on cholesterol levels are inconsistent. Again, maybe this is kind of missing the forest for the trees here. Long-term adherence challenges exist. Additionally, potential micronutrient deficiencies and safety concerns require careful consideration. So I've been on the carnivore diet for almost 2 years, and no, I have not got scurvy. So while the ketogenic diet offers potential benefits, further research is needed to establish its efficacy and safety as long-term prevention strategies. That's kind of like the disclaimer that you're going to see a lot of times. They're just going to say, well, it's new, it hasn't really been studied, we don't have really long-term studies, so maybe just wait for several more years before you can feel confident. Um, so let's look at the full text here. Um, so diabetes mellitus, hyperglycemia due to a decrease in insulin production or insulin sensitivity that eventually leads to severe damage to many of the body's systems, pretty much all of them. International Diabetes Federation estimates that 537 million adults suffer from diabetes, or 1 in 10 individuals. Unfortunately, this figure is predicted to rise to 643 million by 2030 and 783 million by 2045. Diabetes will be responsible for 6.7 million deaths in 2021, or around one death every 5 seconds. 541 million adults have impaired glucose tolerance, which predisposes them to a higher risk of type 2 diabetes. And a systematic review recommends considering the ketogenic diet to succeed in early glycemic control, especially in obese patients in the early disease stage. So you have the possibility of if someone's diagnosed with prediabetes to reverse course there and never progress to diabetes by making some dietary changes. So that should sound appealing to most people. Previous reviews vary in design quality. So looking through PubMed for this 10-year period here. This is what they did with the search bars and stuff. Here's some of the studies that they looked at. Very low carb versus keto versus standard low calorie. ADA's Create Your Plate versus very low carb keto. Very low carb keto versus moderate carb, calorie restricted, low fat. Ketogenic versus the routine diet for diabetes. Mediterranean plus. We looked at this one. We already talked about that. The well-formulated keto versus Med Plus. Glycemic control. Um. Study revealed that participants undergoing the intervention significantly lowered the HbA1c levels compared to the control group. Average HbA1c decrease was 0.8% in the intervention group versus 0.3% in the control group. Difference was statistically significant. P equals 0.002. So that's a good sign for keto. And then uncontrolled blood glucose levels, patients. If they were using insulin, they were excluded. Very low carb versus moderate carb, calorie restricted, low fat. Ketogenic diet experienced significantly greater drop in HbA1c levels compared to the other group. Average decrease from 6.6 to 6.1 in the keto and versus 6.9 to 6.7 in the comparison. 2016, very low carb keto, carbs less than 50 grams per day to standard low calorie. A 4-month study found very low carb keto experienced significantly greater reductions in HbA1c and improved blood glucose control compared to the standard diet group, P less than 0.05, etc. Average weight loss 12.7 in the kilograms in the intervention group and 3.0 kilograms in the control group. I mean, that's just huge difference there. And outside of the tails, I mean, the 95% confidence interval tails. Average weight loss in low carb is 7.9 compared to 1.7 kilograms in the MCCR group. I mean, it's just like clear cut. Kidney function markers were not significantly different between people who were on a very low carb keto and those who were on a low calorie. Could it stand against the Mediterranean diet, which gets all the hype? Some ketogenic diet is strictly eliminating legumes, fruits, and whole grains. Both improve blood glucose as measured by HbA1c, but neither was significantly better than the other. I mean, again, there could be other confounding factors involved here now. Participants may have found Mediterranean diet easier to sustain long term. Again, those kind of some cultural, social factors there. There's public perception, narratives about Mediterranean diet and stuff. Overall, studies suggested both dietary approaches can benefit blood glucose control. Findings consistently demonstrate efficacy of ketogenic diets in managing type 2. Central theme, significant improvement in glycemic control as evidenced by reduction in A1C level is likely multifaceted, attributed to factors such as weight loss, increased insulin sensitivity, and potential alterations in gut microbiota composition. Well, maybe, but that's really speculative, and we don't even necessarily need to go there. These results have been replicated in multiple reviews. Weight management, ketogenic diet is proven effective in inducing substantial weight loss. This is crucial. Ability of ketogenic diets to reduce the need for diabetes medications is a promising finding. That's this effect of ketogenic diets, which we looked at. 12-month outcomes. There's another study. Not only improves patient adherence. Yeah, because you can if you can sell it keto by saying that they might be able to come off their diabetes medications, or at least to some degree, and save some money. So that's what this patient adherence is getting at, but also implications for healthcare costs. So that's a good thing, because we're spending less money on drug costs. However, it's crucial to emphasize medication reduction should be undertaken under strict medical supervision to prevent uncontrolled hyperglycemia. I mean, yeah, that's common sense. If somebody does this, and they're seeing a primary doctor, they should let their primary doctor know about that they're on keto or whatever. Future research should focus on head-to-head comparisons. Evidence supports the efficacy of ketogenic diets in improving glycemic control, promoting weight loss. These diets should be implemented under medical supervision to address potential safety concerns and optimize outcomes. Again, a little disclaimer, little CYA. Last one is the Harvard study, so-called Harvard study on the carnivore diet. So this is a kind of a weird one in that it is basically sent a bunch of questionnaires out to people who claim to be on the carnivore diet, people who have been there on it for at least 6 months, adult self-identifying as carnivore, and just kind of reporting on how they were baseline before they started and how they're feeling now. Then 14 months on average, 44-year-old on average, 67% male population, under 10% have vegetable, fruit, or grain more often than monthly, 37% don't use any vitamins, gastrointestinal symptoms, 3 to 5%, other stuff, 2% dermatological, and Reported high levels of satisfaction improvement. So in overall health, 95%, well-being, 66 to 91, various medical conditions, 48 to 98, median BMI from 27.2 to 24.3, LDL markedly elevated 172, HDL 68, triglycerides 68 were optimal. Participants with diabetes report benefits including reductions in median BMI 4.3, glycated hemoglobin 0.4%, and diabetes medication use 84 to 100%. In other words, coming off of diabetes medications, or at least 84% of them, like 6 out of 7 or something like that. So yeah, this one I wouldn't dwell on it too much because again, it's kind of there's the self-reporting stuff. So you might have, for lack of a better word, like the kind of like the proponents of the carnivore diet, or um, are the people who are reporting, but they're basically feeling better. And this study does, to kind of contextualize it, mention that Arctic nomadic societies where they don't where they might eat little to no plants historically, and they've done fine. And we know about the Inuit studies and people studying the Inuits where they essentially don't eat any plants in their diet because there's not a lot of plants out in the Arctic Circle, and they're healthy people. And so these researchers who went and tried it, like these Americans who tried it, and they had some difficulty adopting it, but they did notice that the people seemed to be basically free of a lot of these modern diseases. And then again, they took out people who were less than 18 or had been on the carnivore diet less than 6 months. And they essentially, again, and I would essentially not dwell too much on putting too much stock in these supports in the results here, because again, it's kind of, you're going to expect that people are generally going to say that they are feeling better and they're happy, because most people on a carnivore diet will tell you that they're feeling happy about it. Most of them are almost half eat red meat daily, and then dairy as well. Eggs 37% daily. Not that surprising. Um, then look at this. Chronic diseases. This is pretty much what we were saying as far as their motivations improve overall health. I'm sorry, sorry, not motivations, but the changes seen. 95% say health is better, 91% say hunger, food cravings are better, 85% better mental clarity, etc. 89% better energy, all that. Obesity, overweight, resolve 52%, improved 41%. That's pretty good. Some people underweight, again, they generally more than 50% said the problem resolved. High blood pressure, 61% said it resolved. Diabetes, 74% said it resolved. That is striking. Now, I mean, I guess maybe that's only 400 people out of 2,000, but that's a big number. 76% felt urologic problems got better. That could be just having to wake up at night to go to use the bathroom. Not really sure what's falling under that umbrella. 52% discontinued insulin. 92% discontinued insulin who were type 2 diabetics on insulin. Insulin dependent type 2s and stuff. Weight, again, there's kind of this pre-diet number. Maybe the pre-diet number is not so known. The coronary artery calcium scores, etc. But 0 coronary artery calcium. 0 is the median. 0 Q1. Pre-diet, 0. Q1, yeah. Creatinine, I mean, that's all normal and so forth. I mean, you know, A1Cs, everything is less than 6. So again, HDLs, 68. Oh, this is the quartiles, Q1, Q3 quartile. So the weights go, yeah, BMI 24, LDL 172, median, HDL 68, HDL to triglyceride ratio essentially 1 to 1. Satisfaction, high levels of overall satisfaction, majority perceive no impact on the social life. Neutral or positive supportiveness from social contacts. Yeah, I noticed essentially maybe in the beginning it might be a little difficult, but then people just kind of, then eventually it's just becomes, that's fine, not a problem. And reported perceived good health status, absence of symptoms, high satisfaction. First small report on a large group of people habitually consuming few plant foods, a dietary pattern broadly considered incompatible with good health. So this is kind of a funny statement to make, because it's basically saying that these people are counterculture and they're happy about it. They don't mind. Consistent with low-carb diet studies, respondents reported mixed blood lipid pattern. Again, that's kind of assuming that LDL, that all this is high LDL, is that this is a unequivocally a bad thing. There's no nuance to it. LDL high, HDL triglycerides low, favorable. HDL high, triglycerides low. However, again, here we go again. LDL cholesterol elevation associated with low triglycerides may reflect large, buoyant lipoprotein particles, so-called good LDL, or not so bad LDL, possibly comprising a relatively low-risk subtype. Indeed, the low ratio of triglyceride HDL cholesterol level is suggestive of high insulin sensitivity and good cardiometabolic health. However, it is unclear whether this apparent benefit of the diet, together with the reported weight reduction and improved glycemic control, would counterbalance or outweigh any increase from LDL cholesterol elevation. For individuals with more extreme LDL cholesterol response, drug treatment could be considered. An option is generally more effective and better tolerated than drug treatment of insulin resistance dyslipidemia. So again, it's even acknowledging, they're even acknowledging this LDL increase might not be a problem. And then beyond macronutrient composition, elimination of allergenic, inflammatory, other food components may provide potential health benefits to individuals following a carnivore diet. Those food allergies and sensitivities related to plant foods, lecithin in beans, cyanogenic glycosides in certain seeds, glycoalkaloids in potatoes, those oxalates that you're avoiding, those goitrogenic vegetables, those that deal with mess with your iodine absorption and so forth. So yeah, that is the last one, and I think that is it for this video. Thanks.